This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
All right, what did you think of these jokes? Do you think these roast jokes at the midwinter ball were good?
All right, what have we got? What have we got here?
We've got the black tie three-course dinner where politicians from every party and their plus ones rub shoulders with Australia's corporate bigwigs and journalists in the Great Hall of Parliament is meant to be off the record. But the Daily Mail was not in attendance, so is not bound by the rules prohibiting the journalists present from reporting what is said. Once again, said this on the show before, if you're a journalist and you go to this thing and you don't report what people are saying, you're a bad journalist. That's my personal opinion, but there we go. On Thursday, we revealed that Albanese had not been able to resist taking a sly dig at Max Chandler-Mather. This election, we farewelled my favourite Green, Albanese told the audience, as a picture of Max Chandler-Mather flashed on the screen.
Oh.
Not that Green, the PM said, this Green. And it then changed to Anthony Green from the ABC, who retired from election coverage.
Yeah, look, to be honest, that's not... I think if you're going to do a midwinter ball joke and do your shitty, bullshit, look at me, I'm Jon Stewart jokes, then that's pretty good. That's about right. It does go to show that, he's playing on his public persona of being, an insane crybaby. It's
like the sorest winner I've ever seen in my fucking life. You have a 93 seats. You are in the one-party state, for God's sakes, and you're still whining and bitching about this.
Maybe someone was there who could tell us, but were there any other jokes made about, backbenchers from a minor party? I mean, maybe there probably were, but...
Who were out of Parliament. There's probably some Peter Dutton jokes, yeah.
When you see the midwinter ball, which obviously is awful and shouldn't happen and et cetera, but Parliament is high school or maybe it's university. You know, they have 12 contact hours a week and then they have a 3-month holiday and they're fucking bullies. They're all that episode of 30 Rock where Liz Lemon thinks she's the bully, but she's the bully. That's the Labor Party. You know that they won't give staffers to Senator Payman. So the people who voted for her don't get democracy because Labor are bully cunts. It's so fucked. And I don't like that Larissa Warder and Sarah Hanson-Young went to the midwinter ball, probably others.
I know, not going is the best option, though. You've really just got to not go. I think when Max was in there, didn't they do a little protest out the front? Max did respond with a post saying, apparently the Prime Minister chose to dedicate part of his speech to the Midwinter Ball, a ridiculous event where politicians, CEOs, lobbyists and journalists all wine and dine together, to having another go at me. He's obsessed. Personally, I take it as a compliment, but at least I got to send a journalist a meme in response. And for the record, I never attended a Midwinter Ball while I was an MP. The meme in question is the one from Mad Men about I never even think about you at all.
I feel bad for you.
I don't think about you at all.
Change from within is definitely the topic of this week's episode, it seems, and how it doesn't work. Someone was telling us that story. Someone was working somewhere recently a few weeks ago, and Albo came through to do a press pack photo shoot thing, and the person said, "Oh, I'm friends with Max Chandler-Mather," and Albanese goes, "Oh, well, I'm much nicer than him."
Oh.
And it's who the fuck asked you, cunt? Jesus Christ! Anyway, fucking loser.
And that's only going to escalate even further unless we take a stand on this and make sure you know who you vote for next time, and certainly never vote for the Greens, the hateful, un-Australian people they are.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Yep, this sounds like serious danger to me, everybody. This is a podcast about Green politics in Australia. It is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's an official Labor Party podcast. And it is made possible with the help of the Green Institute. I am Tom Ballard, coming to you from Gadigal country this week, actually. And my lovely friend here is Michael the Griffin, our producer. Hello, Michael.
Hi, sorry, I'm very mouthy.
You are very mouthy, a little bit spicy this week, but that's totally encouraged. As you probably noticed, Emerald Moon is not with us again this week. In case you missed the news last week, very sadly, Emerald Moon suddenly lost her mother. She is processing that and working through that and surrounded by lots of people who love and care for her, including you. And I want to say a huge thank you to all the people across social media, our danger dogs on the Patreon who have sent nothing but love and condolences. And I can let you know that Emerald has seen these messages and she really appreciates them. I think you can appreciate her not responding to all of them, but she is seeing them, and the amount of love and care that's been coming in for her has been, yes, very moving and very sweet. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, team. And we will, she will return to the show in due course, but obviously she can take as long as she needs because, despite what you believe, podcasting is not the most important thing in the world. Instead of Emerald this week, I'm going to be joined by the Executive Director of the Green Institute, Tim Hollo, to discuss what's happened this week, this xenophobia bonanza that we've all been enjoying across Australia. And he's got a bit of news that he would like to share with you about him, the future of the Green Institute, and so forth. Mike, you want to plug another podcast, which I find deeply offensive, but go on.
Yeah, have you heard of Chapo Trap House? No, so I've been producing this Floodcast, which is an old Brisbane show that's been revived. It's sort of the crew, sort of the Max Chandler-Mather adjacent, like Brisbane Greens crew that, the Icarus crew. And now that they've fallen back to earth, they've revived their old podcast, and it's they're trying to work out what's next for the movement and talking about what happened and what's next. And so you do get, they're doing some recaps of the years with, Max and Amy McMahon and what happened in South Brisbane and all that sort of stuff. And then talking about what's next. There's an episode coming out this week about like electoral staffers and what they do, well, what Greens electoral staffers do, because I think that's very different to what Labor electoral staffers do. I mean, 2016, 17, 18, when I tried to get them to lift a finger about robo-debt, and they did fuck all for 3 years and now pretend to have solved it. Anyway, but yeah, this Floodcast, it's coming out fortnightly, and I'd love for you to check it out if you search for it on your podcast app. Really good. I'm sure lots of people listen to our show are across it, but if you're not, it's very much up your alley and a great recap. And great to hear from folks who were there on the ground about the wins and how they're feeling about the recent losses. Very much worth your time. Side note, are you going to get any of this payout that we've heard about this week, this big class action from robo-debt? I don't believe so. I got, I believe the way I went through it, because I got, because I was the squeaky wheel that went in the media, and then I got a call from one of their people that's like designed to fix it for you. So I'm pretty sure that I was in the group earlier on enough that they were trying to help us. And then if you were a few months later, they try and destroy your lives. But I think because I was early on enough, they were trying to make it go away. I don't think I'm up for a payout, but I'll look into it. And you know what? $1,000, that's what we really wanted. We didn't actually want justice or anything. So just cancel the NAC, we don't want that extra final recommendation. That's true, Short, and the recommendation isn't real. It's true what you're saying, that it's not a real recommendation. Just give us the cash. That's fixed now.
$1,000.
$1,000. That'll bring them back to life. That'll bring them back to life.
Jesus.
Yeah, they put in people in charge of the NAC who are mates with the people who ran robo-debt. So there's obviously not going to be any justice. That's the reality.
No justice, no peace. Big thanks to our patrons who support the show. You can go to patreon.com/SeriousDangerAU for just $3 a month. You can get bonus content. Thank you to Damien, Daniel, and Frankie for joining the Danger Dog family. We love you. And this week's Patreon episode just came out, more of our conversation with Dr. Richard Dennis. He joined us on the weekly show last week or week before that. And we talked about his essay for the Patreon, his essay, Dead Center, How Political Pragmatism is Killing Us. Fascinating conversation, great essay. And if you really want to hear us tee off on centrism and how it drives us all crazy and is, as Richard says, killing us, you definitely want to listen to our latest Patreon episode. Yeah, this is the one that the sickos will really get into. I liked it. Eat it, you pigs.
There's plenty of things that can divide us, but there's one thing that unites us all: our flag. Our diggers fought under it, and newest Australian citizens celebrate their first day with it. It's the symbol that unites us all. Happy Australian National Flag Day.
All right, my co-host for this week is our old mate, Tim Hollo. He's the former communications director for the Australian Greens leader Christine Milne, the co-founder of Green Music Australia, former Greens candidate, the executive director of the Green Institute, and author of Living Democracy, an ecological manifesto for the end of the world as we know it. Hello, Tim. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Tom. Lovely to be here.
How are you is a very loaded question at the moment with the world, but like, are you okay? How are you? You right?
It's a very loaded question, isn't it? It's funny how it used to be, the easy start. And now, I don't have an answer to that. I'm doing all right. The world is on fire. Sure. I broke my shoulder recently. I'm doing all right.
Oh, God. How did you do that? You told me this. What did you do? How did you do that?
I mean, I was having a lovely ski on my 50th birthday with my kid, and the lovely snow, easy to get to from Canberra. And I wasn't doing anything stupid, just had a little fall, bang. That's what happens when you're not as young as you used to be.
You and Dave Hughes getting injured out there. That's you're the same. Tim has a bit of an update for our dear listeners about where you're at and the Green Institute, which we will get to in a moment. But I thought we'd start by chatting about the incredible week in xenophobia that we've seen. It's been a huge week. If you're a xenophobe, why are you listening to this? But you've had a huge week, I reckon, across Australia. A very ugly and very racist week in this beautiful country. We had the March for Australia rallies last weekend. We saw neo-Nazis marching and speaking on our streets, espousing explicitly white nationalist propaganda. We've heard chants of love it or leave it, Australia first and send them back. And we saw Nazis in Melbourne committing a violent and heinous attack on a First Nations camp in Melbourne. Then the sort of fallout flowed through Parliament. We had One Nation trying to get an inquiry into mass immigration, quote unquote. We had Pauline Hanson crying about her ability to display the Australian flag. Liberal Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price made claims that Labor is deliberately promoting the migration of Indian people to Australia for the sake of votes. Comments that, even for her, she had to walk back. This is apparently too racist for her, and she had to clarify that, said that was a mistake. Meanwhile, the Labor Party, in sort of classic Labor style, have been kind of all over the place. They condemned the neo-Nazis at the rally. Very good. Albanese also said there were good people there with legitimate concerns about immigration. And all this is playing out as his government is simultaneously passing laws to strip people seeking asylum of procedural fairness and due process so that we can deport this cohort of people to Nauru, who we are bribing with billions of dollars over the next couple of decades to take these people off our hands in blatant violation of our international obligations under humanitarian and refugee law. Jane Favero, the Deputy Chief Executive of the ASRC, said, "It is hypocritical that Labor MPs and senators are condemning anti-immigration protests while at the same time launching some of the most anti-immigration laws and deportations this country has ever seen." So that's a lot. Let's discuss. Those are the main highlights for me. Right. What have you made of all this pretty depressing week?
I mean, I think hypocrisy is the least of it, isn't it, really? But it's just really part of this long continuum that we've been part of for so long. Australia, it goes without saying, is based on a racist mythology, has been from its very outset, and also like an internally racist and colonial mindset. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking with the whole Nauru business is, it harks back to 240, 250 years ago when with the Industrial Revolution in England, you had this massive surplus population. You had revolutions around the world, people getting scared. So what do? They decide to just deport a bunch of people to somewhere a long way away so that you don't need to worry about them anymore. And 240 years later, we start to replicate the same thing over here. It's a horror, but it shouldn't be surprising. that we've reached this point. We've had government after government after government enabling racism to continue to work its way into kind of mainstream politics. And, you've had government after government also kind of talking about making life better for people and then failing to do so. I think this is one of the things that we're seeing all around the world with the rise of the far right is there's legitimate concerns without going into Albo's ridiculous there's good people there. The point is fascism always works with a bait and switch. That's how it works. It points out legitimate concerns that people have about inequality, about weird shit happening, about losing jobs, about change that isn't being managed well by government and isn't being managed well in our communities. And then it points the finger in the wrong direction, instead of pointing the finger at the billionaire class, instead of pointing the finger at, the politics of hate, it shoves it around and blames migrants, or, blames whoever's the convenient scapegoat. And that's just going on around the world. Australia is one small part of that. We're seeing it in America, we're seeing it in Europe, seeing it all over the world. It's horrific that it's come here, and it's horrific that we have governments and media that have no idea what to do about it, or they're kind of torn. And I think this is what's going on, with Labor, implementing these really hateful laws while kind of saying, but that's not good. Labor's totally incoherent on almost everything at the moment. I think is one of the things that I'm really struggling with at the moment is I feel like Labor used to have a slightly more coherent politics, but they seem to only stand for just power for power's sake these days, just staying in government.
We believe in whatever we're doing. Whatever we're doing right now, then that's the correct position to take. And forget about our broader principles, forget about the rhetoric we put out there, and ignore the gap between what we say we're about and what we're actually doing. Whatever we're doing right now is awesome.
Absolutely. And if you're criticizing it, then you're a terrible, terrible human, of course. And you can't possibly be taken seriously. We see climate change as a serious, serious issue, and we're just going to keep approving new fossil fuel extraction. And if you don't agree with that, then you must be some kind of crazy extremist greenie.
You're in the Greens political party.
Yeah, it's incoherent. And so much of the media critique is totally incoherent as well. It's really, it's like it's all being churned out by ChatGPT.
It's very predictable. I didn't hear anything about Canberra. Were there Nazis on the streets of Canberra? Was there much of a rally at all last weekend?
We had Pauline Hanson here.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I forgot that. She wasn't in Brisbane or Queensland?
No, she was here in Canberra. It was, I wasn't here. I was kind of on the bus back from Sydney myself, so I didn't see it. But a bunch of friends and associates and colleagues were there, and it was a sizable crowd here in Canberra too, which is pretty horrifying.
Well, this is it. Like, were you surprised? Because going into it, there was a lot of mockery, rightfully so, and the organising of it was often shambolic, particularly when they were trying to settle on the messaging about exactly how racist this rally was going to be. We talked about that on the show a little bit. But, full credit to lots of counter-protesters and people on the left who sort of identify this as pretty serious. And I think if you total all the numbers across the country, certainly in recent memory, this was the largest mobilisation of the far right in Australia. In a very, very long time. And I think while we all would have loved to have seen, 6 people in Australia flags out there being drowned out by the left in every instance, that's just not what happened. It was actually quite a sizable turnout, considering just how extreme and far right the ideas and organising principles around that rally was.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was surprised and devastated. I think also it's important to recognise that this was, Yes, it was a mess, but it was also being promoted by some of the biggest voices on the right on the internet, and not only in Australia, of course, but in America, and a whole lot of Australian far right people who might be open to far right politics and rhetoric are following American lead in this a lot. So when you've got Musk and Rogan and folk like that kind of pointing to it, I think it's not that surprising. I think, in fact, we can take a little bit of hope from the fact that despite all of that, and despite the fact that, it was, where police and governments obviously are doing everything they can to suppress pro-Palestine protests and to suppress climate protests, they kind of were just enabling, not actively, but by omission, sort of just letting this one happen. It's not that surprising that they got crowds. And I think, it's a hopeful thing that those crowds were absolutely tiny in comparison to the really big, National Day of Action for Palestine and the Harbour Bridge March and things like that. We still do have a lot more people who are standing up for justice, a hell of a lot more people who are standing up for justice. And I think that it's not unuseful in a sense to have a bit of a wake-up call. I think in Australia we can get pretty complacent about, the rise of the politics of hate. We've been lucky that the politicians who've been trying to drive that, whether it's Hanson or, David Leyonhjelm or, Abbott and Dutton, have been smacked down pretty fast. And that's partly because they just haven't been very good at it. We've been lucky that we've had kind of shitty proto-fascists in this country.
We've had Egg Boy on stand to take down Fraser Anning. He's been standing by. I wonder where Egg Boy is these days.
Who would have thought 5 years ago, Egg Boy and Avi Yamini standing in a park together, united.
Not me.
Against Antifa. Love it.
I mean, because often the left is accused of, having their hair on fire and overreacting and hyperventilating and calling everything a Nazi. But then, man, I saw clips from this rally of the ordinary people, okay? So people decked out in an Aussie flag and like an Aussie flag bucket hat. And they're being interviewed and they're saying, that guy who's speaking right now, he's literally a neo-Nazi. Like he likes Hitler and he's actually talking about a white Australia. And you get responses from some people that were like, well, if they're out supporting this country, if they're getting behind Australia, that's the main thing. Like,
yeah,
really dark, like really deeply dark shit going on there, and quite confronting. Even if you are someone who's constantly concerned about fascism and neo-Nazis and thinking about this a lot, to actually see it from quote unquote everyday Aussies, it's chilling. Really.
Yeah, no, it's horrifying. And as you know, I'm Jewish. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. It's terrifying. It is incredibly chilling. And I think, one of the things I've been doing along with so many others is going back and reading Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism. And, that kind of work from the critics of the time and analysing what's going on. And, the key factors that Arendt and so many others pointed to were spiralling inequality, government more and more and more alienated from the people, so the people not feeling like they have agency in their own lives, control over, government or economy, able to determine the direction of their own lives. And the other key factor is the destruction of reality. Misinformation and disinformation and the flooding the zone with shit, it's replicating what was being done in the 30s. And we're seeing that at so many levels in our society today. So we really should not be surprised that this is happening at all. And, for me, there are really, really, really crucial lessons for politics about that, we can't just respond by kind of trying to patch up a system which has led us here, trying to kind of make that a little bit better. We've actually got to work incredibly hard to bring people together across difference to kind of, improve our material lives together through government, but also in the community through mutual aid, that kind of work that kind of brings people together into a shared reality, into a space where they can feel a little bit safer and a little bit more secure. that's the only way we can disrupt this path.
You touched on a little bit before, but in the political response to these rallies, I think we sort of saw that playbook that we touched on before about how particularly mainstream parties and those of the right will use narrative and the stories around immigration to let themselves off the hook and to scapegoat their own failures. So this week we had the government saying that the permanent migration intake target is going to stay at 185,000 this year. And you had coalition members sort of trying to, yes, condemn the Nazis, but while also sort of playing into the legitimate concerns notion too. This is from the ABC. The coalition wants to see the migration levels lowered, with Susan Ley warning on Wednesday morning that the current policy was heaping pressure on every corner of the country, on infrastructure, on housing, and our way of life. The opposition leader later expanded on her comments during an interview with ABC, stating, people talk to me about the commute from home to work taking 3 times as long because the roads, the infrastructure, the parking, the housing in particular. She went on to clarify that the comment was never about migrants. What? I love our Australian migrants. I'm one myself. I'm grateful every day for the opportunities of this country. It's about getting the balance between our infrastructure and our migration program, and that is for the government to explain. Shout out to the ABC, who then clarify the permanent migration program mostly gives visas to those who are already residing in the country, so it does not directly affect net migration, which takes in the inflow and outflow of temporary migrants, such as international students. But, I mean, yeah, this is the trick, right? Neoliberal capitalism runs down everything, fucks over ordinary people. You underinvest as a state because we've got to withdraw, we've got to cut taxes for rich people. Society sucks. The function of society gets worse and worse and worse. And rather than taking responsibility for that or proposing any kind of program to change that and address that by greater investments, you get to say, nah, it's those people over here, these people of color who are a bit different from you, who might pray a little bit differently and eat different food. They're the real problem, nothing to do with us.
Right, and it's the constant crisis that that capitalism thrives on, of course, and that right-wing politics thrives on. As you say, it's a process of running everything down, and I think this is one of the challenges that we've got at the moment. Well, for Greens in particular, as we start to get more successful in various parliaments and get into positions where we can start making decisions, is that government institutionally is really, really broken. And it's incredibly difficult to get things done. I mean, we've just had a report here in Canberra today, the government, which the Greens have removed ourselves from, I think, very appropriately after the last election, having been in government with Labor for 3 terms and achieved some really important, really, really fantastically important stuff. The government's just decided to push out the next stage of our light rail development by another, half a century or whatever, like not exaggeration, but it took so long to build, phase 1 of the light rail. The next phase is going to take 15 years to just go another. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
Government doesn't seem to be able to do anything anymore because neoliberalism has run it down so badly, and because lines of accountability in government have been so badly undermined. And even when you have good people in there trying to get good stuff done, it doesn't get done. And so that absolutely, it leaves the door wide open for the right to then say, well, it's the migrants' fault, or however you want to do it. And it plays into NIMBYist concerns. It plays into, all sorts of areas. I think the other thing that is really important to point out in the context of this kind of blaming migrants for problems that we've created and the constant crisis mentality is the way the crisis is the point and the way punishment is the point. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about in the context of the Naru deal is Behruz Bouchani's extraordinary book, No Friend But the Mountains, and his idea in that book that he wrote from Manus Island as a refugee in the Manus camp there, his idea of Manus prison theory, as he puts it, which is precisely the point that for government, punishment is the point here. They weren't sending desperate refugees to Manus Island to punish them, in fact, or to be cruel to them. They were punishing and sending people to Manus as a warning to everyone else. And I think that's a really crucial thing to remember here. You know, that Manus Island was not about the refugees who were sent to Manus. It was about all of the refugees who were contemplating coming here, to say, don't you dare get on a boat. Don't you dare try to come to Australia, because this is what's going to happen to you. And I think the same thing's going on at so many levels in our society. I mean, you can see it in the labour market and the way our governments, you know, Labor and coalition treat people on welfare. You know, and you know, we had the robo-debt catastrophe, and it just keeps being replicated in all sorts of different ways. And it's not about the people themselves who are being subjected to this. It's a warning to everybody else. You're in a shitty job which you don't like, but don't you dare leave it. You have to stay in there. You have to keep selling your labour in this way, because if you don't, you might end up in the same situation that those folk on robo-debt are. This is going on at so many levels with government, the way it operates now, the intertwining of government and capital, to say, you citizens need to behave yourselves in the way that we tell you to behave, or we'll punish you. And it leads to where we are now. It leads to the politics of hate. It leads to crisis.
Just again, absolutely, and that's very well said. And I want to reiterate the idea that we should absolutely reject this false reasoning, this false narrative, and the xenophobic thinking and mindset that leads ordinary people to, yes, blame each other horizontally as opposed to directing their outrage and concern and resistance upwards at the people in power who are responsible. Now, having said that, I've tried to sort of talk through this on the podcast before, and I feel like I might have phrased things clumsily. But I just say, on the matter of immigration, you do sort of eventually end up coming back to a number, or at least that's that people want to talk about numbers. And I'd be interested in your experience working in politics on the federal level. I mean, you know, even I believe the Greens' humanitarian policy is still to increase Australians' humanitarian intake to 50,000 people. Like, you do eventually land on numbers, and it's possible, I think, to think about that, to interrogate that without, you know, flying into hateful xenophobic rhetoric, simply because we have a system in Australia in which a number is set or a target is set when it comes to, you know, different immigrations and the number of visas that we issue. So I'd just be really interested in how you think about that, how we can talk about that, and whether the matter of numbers, yes, was something that you came across a lot in your time in federal politics, and whether the left or the Greens specifically need to have a position that, you know, a number exists. Do we think that number is too low, too high, or just right? How do you think about all that?
It's a really good question, and it's a question without an easy answer, or without an answer at all. I mean, my kind of broad response to it is that a politics that demands numbers is precisely part of the problem, actually, and that what we need, you know, as Greens, is to really champion the idea of nuance and complexity in politics, and really thinking through deeper than simply putting numbers on it. I think the Greens policy approach that focuses on rethinking, you know, the different types of immigration into Australia is a really powerful and important one, whereby, you know, we challenge the idea that you can simply buy a ticket. If you've got enough money, you can come. And, you know, if you want in politics to talk about queue jumpers, you know, the real queue jumpers are the people who can say, well, I've got a lot of money, so let me in, as opposed to the desperate refugees getting on boats because they don't have any other option to survive. You know, and dramatically increasing humanitarian intakes, I think, is absolutely crucial. Partly, you know, and again, it's really difficult because you start to get into this kind of utilitarian approach. But you know, we choose refugees on the basis of the people who we think might fit into society and the people who we think might benefit society. My parents both came here as refugees themselves, and you know, they became, you know, my father became a doctor, my mother became a teacher, their siblings became architects, and talk about contribution to Australia. That's not what it should be about. But people who come here as refugees are extraordinarily grateful and want to give back. That's what happens. So I think we really need to challenge a whole lot of the rhetoric that kind of underpins a whole lot of this stuff. By the same token, in terms of kind of putting a number on it, as you say, and thinking through totals, you know, the other lens that I want to put onto that is the idea that, you know, here I go about to challenge the nation state as an institution. You know, that's part of
what are we like 20 minutes in? That's pretty good. Hold on.
You know, this idea, that idea kind of relies on the conceptualization that Australia can separate itself from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that, you know, we need to deal with our population here in some way that is differentiated, and that we can wall it off from the rest of the world. There's a basic reality that we cannot. Australia is a region that is fundamentally intertwined with the regions that are surrounding us directly and indirectly. And yes, you know, trying to deal with our population challenges without acknowledging that it's just one small part of population challenges that are all around the world, whether they be infrastructure challenges, whether they be, you know, resourcing challenges, whether they be ecological challenges, and we need to deal with that as a planet. And again, I'm not gonna kind of indulge in population rhetoric, because I think, apart from anything else, there's a hell of a lot of evidence that global population is going to crash in our lifetimes. So we need to be thinking about what we do in the context of what is happening around the world. We can't talk about Australia's immigration intake without talking about what's going on in Indonesia, without talking about what's going on in Bangladesh, you know, without talking about what's going on all around the world. So, yeah, I guess that's what I would say. Do we need to put a number on it? I don't think we do. I think we need to have a sophisticated conversation about Australia in the world. And how, as a global community, we confront the challenges of inequality, of ecological crisis, of democratic crisis, how we do that here at home, and how we support people around the world to confront those crises as well.
Man, you're so right. Like, you start thinking about it and it all just falls apart. The whole premise, as you say, the nation state, of the idea that the extent of our moral concern should end at national borders, that I have more of a right to exist on this, stolen land, but like that I have done something by being born here that someone who wasn't born here hasn't done, or I think
the absolute pinnacle of that for me was the Rudd Labor government's you know, concern for refugees drowning at sea on the way here, and you know, that our job as Australia was to kind of make sure that they didn't drown at sea, but we didn't give a shit if they were dying in refugee camps, you know, a little bit further away. That's not our problem. It's only our problem if they're trying to get here, and then we need to turn them away and again institute Buchani's Manus prison theory to terrify other people into not coming.
Well, we're seeing that with the Naru deal, right? Like, again, just a bit more details here in case people missed it. But we found out this week the government is going to pay Naru more than $408 million to resettle hundreds of non-citizens caught up in the High Court's NZYQ decision after the Home Affairs Minister signed a deal in an unannounced visit to the Micronesian nation on Friday. All very transparent and upfront. They signed a member of understanding saying that we're going to pay you $70 million per year to cover the ongoing resettlement costs for the group of more than 350 people. So these are the people who were held in indefinite immigration detention in Australia before the High Court said, you can't do that. That's actually illegal to keep people detained indefinitely with no reasonable prospect of deportation. Yes, many of these people have a history of violent offending and they've been convicted, and some of them have reoffended since being released. Okay, fair enough. But it's just like, okay, if you think they're a threat to the community or whatever, I guess you don't give a shit about Naruan's safety, or we can offload them to Nauru because they are a small country made up of 12,000 people who are obviously very much in need of what will total $2.5 billion over the next 30 years. You can obviously see what the incentive is for Nauru in there. But Australia probably just doesn't give a shit about the safety of other people. Just get them out of here. They're not our responsibility. It's like, it's so brutal and so barefaced, I suppose. It's real mask off shit.
Right. And I think it's really, really important to bear in mind that, they're using this rhetoric, this very Trumpian rhetoric, frankly, of these are violent offenders. This is exactly out of Trump's playbook. These are violent offenders. When, firstly, only a few of them are, and there's several who are, who've been convicted of, possession of a bit of weed, for instance, who are, it's extraordinary. But secondly, these are people who have served their time.
Yes.
They've been convicted of offences. They have served their time, and they are back out in the community. And we absolutely need to stand by the basic principle that if you've been punished for something, you shouldn't be punished again. And putting these people into immigration detention in the first place was the problem. And that's what the High Court said. This is not appropriate. You should not do that. So the government should have just changed their minds and worked to support people to reintegrate into the community. And this is one of the fundamental problems with criminal justice, of course, in this country across the board, is that we're not interested in helping ex-offenders reintegrate back into the community and do well in their lives. There's so much evidence that if we do that, then people do provide paths back into the community in really positive ways. But no, we don't want to do that. If somebody's done something that we decide is bad, we just keep punishing them and keep punishing them and keep punishing them. And so too often they do something that we decide is bad again, because it's the open pathway for them, and that's been determined. So yeah, it's a horrific extra layer on something that we can see at so many layers in our society that's going just out of sight, out of mind.
And as part of making this deal happen this week in Parliament, natural justice, the requirement to provide a fair hearing to people subject to a decision, would not apply where third country reception arrangements are in place. Okay, so this Labor government passed laws to get rid of the whole, natural justice or the procedural fairness requirements. So just think, if you're a Labor MP and you're voting for the anti-fairness law, the anti-just procedure law, maybe have a look at yourself, for God's sakes, and think, this might not be totally in line with everything I say I am as a human being who supports human rights and justice, for God's sakes. It's disgraceful. It's been condemned by refugee advocacy groups across the board, including Human Rights Watch. The laws went through a 2-hour Senate inquiry on Wednesday night. Normally inquiries take several weeks, but 2 hours, apparently that was all enough. It's going to be supported by the coalition. The inquiry heard from Home Affairs officials, but did not seek external submissions or produce a report.
Yeah.
So all seems pretty legit. Green Senator David Shoebridge says the proposal will undermine the entire legal system. There you go. That's your Labor government, everybody. That's Fortress Australia. That is an obsession with borders and xenophobia. And yes, once again, the hypocrisy to condemn the racist anti-immigration sentiments we saw in those rallies on the weekend, while you, as a Labor government with a massive majority in power, pushes this shit through. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just totally incoherent. Again, is what's going on here. That Labor likes to make slightly more positive sounds about things a whole lot of the time, but they continue to implement, these really destructive and nasty laws. It's hard to comprehend, but I also think it's really worth kind of thinking about the extent to which we're stuck in a system which enforces this kind of thing here in Australia and around the world. it's a it's a lot of fun to kind of point the finger at Labor and say, "You people are bad people." I'm never going to deny.
Welcome to serious danger.
Of course we should be holding the mirror up to Labor people and saying, "This is what you're doing." But I also think it's really important for us as Greens to recognise that this is a systemic issue. This is about how the Westminster system of liberal representative democracy entwined with capitalism leads us here. And what we need to do is not only engage with the system as it exists and try to make it a little bit less worse, but actually work in our communities from the grassroots up to try to cultivate a better way of doing democracy, a better way of doing economy, so that as this behemoth crumbles, as it is doing, we have a better world that can grow up in its cracks as it happens. Because, I'm increasingly worried that, the Greens, which started as a party, as an anti-establishment party trying to transform our systems of government, the more successful we become within the system, the harder it is to actually see outside that system. The easier it is to kind of continue to operate within that system. So, I guess, as a bit of a pivot, yes, this is Labor, this is your Labor government, but also this is the world we're living in, and we need to do better than that.
Well, let us follow that pivot. That is a beautiful link to the second part of our conversation, which is specifically, and I think you've been touching on it throughout our conversation already, Tim, but you have something that you'd like to share with our listeners. You reached out to us and sort of said, hey, got some news about where I'm at, where I'm moving on with the Green Institute, and would love to sort of lay out my thinking there. So, yes, I'd love to. Maybe just quickly, just a very quick reminder if people aren't totally familiar, what is the Green Institute? How does it work? And what's been your role in it for about 10 years now?
Yeah, so the Green Institute is the official think tank of the Australian Greens, and it's one of my great sadnesses that there's still a lot of people around the party who don't know about us. And we try to reach out as much as we can with tiny resources. We exist because the federal Greens got party status in the federal parliament, and that opened up a small stream of funding, a very small stream of funding, to establish a think tank, a formal think tank for the party. Most think tanks, of course, political think tanks are about policy development, and that's not really appropriate for the Greens because we are a grassroots party that does our policy development at the grassroots. So the space that the Green Institute's carved out is a space for conversation about really big picture political ideas and challenges that are difficult to happen anywhere else. We're the only part of the party that is explicitly not tasked with electoralism in any way, which is a kind of cool space to be in, and a real privilege and luxury. We get to host conversations about big ideas about politics. We get to host conversations about green political theory and ideology, about big picture ideas like the question of labour. We ran a series for a while on universal basic income as a way to have the conversation, not necessarily to purely promote UBI, but to say, what is our relationship as people to the economy and to labour, and how can we tease that apart? We run conversations around rights of nature, a big series over the last year on peace and non-violence, and actually really engaging again with this pillar of the Greens that in some ways is the hardest for a lot of people to grapple with. Non-violence, what does it mean? How does it work? What are its implications for the way we behave with each other, but also how we engage with geopolitics? And then we run workshops around the place. We ran a series of workshops for the party a couple of years ago on theory of change and really grappling with who we are as a party and what we believe our role is in politics. It's a tremendous privilege to have been the executive director of the Institute for the past 10 years. I've learned a tremendous amount, and I've had to pinch myself a number of times in the conversations I've had the privilege of hosting. But I've reached the conclusion that after almost 10 years, it is time to move on. And I'm going to be doing so in the next couple of months. I should say one of the joys has been that you and Emerald approached us a little while ago and said, we'd like to do this podcast, and can you help? And so by sort of providing this auspicing arrangement, we've been able to help you get off the ground, which
we're very grateful for. But you feel like your work is done. You helped make a podcast. Now you're
Serious off the ground. Now I can move on. No,
yes, this will assure the revolution. Goodbye.
I do have a sense that my work here is done to the extent that I think 10 years is a long time. One of the really challenging conversations that the Institute's been able to kind of raise a couple of times quietly is the question of term limits. That's been a difficult question around the Greens for a long time. And I think there's no easy answer to that too, because I think there is good reason when people have been around in politics for them to stay there for a while. But I also think a time comes when you have to actually look at yourself and grapple with, am I still being the best I can be in this position? And that's certainly where I'm finding myself now. I've been thinking a lot about how my theory of change has shifted in recent years, and how the Greens' theory of change has shifted in recent years, and how I engage with questions within the party. And apart from anything else, like, you go through this strange process in life, I think, if you lead a somewhat examined life, where you look around the world and you're really confused, and then you start to kind of come to some conclusions, and you start to get a little bit more clarity on things, and then you go through these cycles of confusion and clarity and confusion and clarity. And I feel like I'm looking at the world with more confusion actually at the moment than I have for a very long time. Partly the rise of AI, partly, the wars and post-pandemic kind of retreat back into world as it has been. And I feel I need to actually take a step back for a while, because I don't know what's going on. I don't know where we go from here.
Okay, first of all, it's so refreshing from someone from a think tank to say that, and to be like, yeah, I don't know here, man. I'm pretty confused, because I guess the job's normally is to think and to pretend like you have all the answers. So that's fucking great. First of all, I mean, thank you for all your work at the Green Institute. Thank you for your help with this podcast, and thank you for all the work and passion and clear thinking and dedication that you've given to the Greens movement, and will continue to do, I'm sure, in the future. But yes, if I can quote the sort of email you sent through to us, you said, my increasing view is that politics, as usual, including Greens playing our allocated role in it, is a dead end. And you sort of talk, you sent me a link to a speech that you gave last year in which you talked a lot about, first of all, how terrible things are at the moment in this poly crisis, as we're seeing a multi-system collapse across the board, all things that I think we'd agree on. And this, it seems to me, has led you, to your position in which you're asking some big questions about how effective electoralism is, and the idea of an electoral political project, trying to win power within a corrupt, broken system and trying to make it a bit better, as you say, seems to be something of a dead end. Tell me if I'm way off there, but if you wouldn't mind, painting that picture a little bit more and explaining a little bit more what you mean.
Yeah, I think we are, as you quoted, we are at a moment in the world, a broad historical moment of polycrisis, of kind of institutional collapse at so many levels. We see that in our governments, we see that in our universities here in Canberra. That's one of the big things at the moment. We see that in corporations. We see that in communities. I go back to Hannah Arendt a lot, as people who know me know. She has this beautiful line where she talks about how every system of power begins to petrify and decay once the living power of the people that holds it together begins to withdraw. And it dovetails with Marx, with the concept of alienation and so many other ideas like that. And I think we're at this moment where so many of our systems are doing this. So many of our systems are petrifying and decaying. That stuff that used to work to a certain extent, in problematic ways, of course, but sort of used to work, doesn't work anymore. And one of the things that I think is really confronting for a whole lot of us, and I talk to a lot of people around the Greens who've had similar experiences. My experience door knocking in recent elections has been really fascinating in that I've had more and more people kind of responding to our proposals with a kind of I really like your ideas. I like your policies and I agree with them, but I just don't believe any of that shit's going to happen.
Yeah.
I've got no faith that this system can deliver that kind of thing. And I think as Greens, we really need to grapple with this idea that we are becoming pretty successful electorally within a system that is dying. You mentioned that, I worked for Christine Milne for years, and I learned a tremendous amount with, working with Christine. One of the things that she used to say many, many years ago is that, you know what's going to happen? The Greens are going to slowly keep growing, and then we're going to end up holding the can when everything's falling apart.
We're going to get that Greens government, and just as the apocalypse kicks in.
Just as all of the shit is hitting all of the fans. And I think there's, I go back to that thought a lot at the moment, that's one of the things that's happening. And that when we do find ourselves in positions of, the dog that caught the car, that we actually do have our hands on certain levers, those levers don't work. They just don't work anymore. And we can get some good things done. Again, here I am in Canberra where we've had Greens in government for 3 terms and, we got this town onto 100% renewable electricity. We've got some really good justice reinvestment programs going. We've got pill testing. We've got investment in public transport and cycle paths and things like that. Really, really important stuff that I don't want to kind of discount in any way. And we also found that a whole lot of the shit that our MPs and ministers were trying to do just didn't happen. Why didn't it happen? It's not entirely clear. Kind of basically because government is sclerotic. Government as an institution isn't working. And I really think as Greens, we have to grapple with this idea. There's a beautiful line that I think a lot of us more and more are kind of quoting without necessarily knowing. It comes from the wonderful Frederick Jamison, African-American Marxist scholar from the 70s, who said, it's easier for us to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And I think we really need to start challenging ourselves, not to just think within the system and how we as Greens can do better within the system, but how we as Greens can use our role, our platform that we get from being an electoral party, our capacity to organise that we get from running election campaigns, and parlay that into deep community building, parlay that into how do we actually bring people together in ways that creates the capacity to build a new world as this one collapses. And that's incredibly hard to do within the system because the system is all-encompassing. And that's kind of where I'm at the moment, is kind of finding there's very little capacity to actually do that at the moment, to actually have those conversations. And I need to go away and scratch my head for a while and work out how to come back again, I think, with a few more ideas about what that might look like. Yeah. So
if I'm hearing you correctly, it's, obviously you're coming at this from a, personal point of view in terms of your role in this and moving away from the Green Institute, but are you not so much calling for the Greens to abandon electoralism, but to expand their concept of what the party and the movement might do and the kind of activities that it does? You still think we should continue to run for and try and win seats in local, state and federal government?
I think the Greens can't not do that because we're a political party.
Yeah.
What I think we need to think about is, why are we doing that? and how are we doing that, and what is our aim in doing that. I think there's still, when you boil things down to their simplest, the theory of change that we present as a party is we have good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
If we knock on enough doors and have conversations with enough people in enough seats, we'll get enough votes to get enough people elected to parliaments so that we can ensure that those parliaments pass better laws. And so our ask of people is vote for us and we'll fix it for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's believable anymore. I think fewer and fewer people in the community believe it, and I think fewer and fewer of us in the Greens actually probably believe it too. But when it comes down to it, that's essentially our theory of change.
You in the speech you mentioned, is this the idea of supplicant politics? What you've called that?
Right, and I guess that's a really good point. That when I make this critique of the Greens, it's a critique that goes at least as strongly for the union movement. It's a critique that goes at least as strongly for the climate movement and environment movements, and most of our social movements are operating on the same basis. This supplicant politics idea that we need to build power in the community, but then we abdicate that power straight away. We give that power away by asking somebody to do something about it, when most of the time we know damn well that they're not going to. The climate movement's really challenged on this at the moment. There's a lot of conversations going on in the climate movement about the collapse in volunteer engagement in the climate movement. And I think that's partly because, there was a bit of a peak, post bushfires and things like that. There was a lot of consciousness around climate for a while. But I think it's very, very much around the fact that people are rightly extraordinarily cynical about the theory of change that says, come and join this march, sign this petition, write to your MP, whatever it is, and demand that those in charge do something about it. When we know they're not going to. We need to work out ways of how we build power in the community and hold on to it. Build power in the community so that we can do stuff together rather than giving it up to a system which cannot solve these crises because the system created these crises. Our liberal democratic capitalist system evolved with the fossil fuel industry. Australia's democracy is fundamentally entirely intertwined with fossil fuels. There was that great report recently that every single federal resources minister for the last 20 years or something has now gone on to work in the fossil fuel sector. I wouldn't
call that a great report. I think it's a bad report.
Yeah, no,
I didn't like that report.
we can name them, but again, it's not about the individuals. It's a system. And who are we trying to fool? I mean, and again, this criticism turns back on myself. I'm not kind of trying to do some outside. This is one of the huge challenges. If you want to ask what the Green Institute does, one of the tasks of the Green Institute is to do to us what I was laughing about. What we as a party try to do to Labor, hold that mirror up. The Green Institute sits in this really tricky, difficult space of being a place where we can critique ourselves from a position of love and support, and that's a difficult place to be in. But I turn this critique back on myself. Like this is stuff that I've been doing for my entire adult life. 25, 30 years I've been working in this space, and I struggle to kind of, we've got important little steps of progress, but the world is getting worse.
Well, it's interesting because, again, on this podcast, we are regularly decrying and laughing at figures like Labour for Refugees or LEAN, the Labour Environmental Action Network, right? Like, aren't you delusional? Can't you see that you're trapped in a institution that is just fundamentally unable to change, that is never going to change and that keeps screwing over? So, yes, very interesting to think how much are we, the change from within group, within... Well, yes, neoliberal capitalism right now and a parliamentary democracy.
Right. It's a very, very difficult, challenge to ourselves to think about that. But I see, this system is built on having people critiquing it. This is one of the geniuses of liberalism intertwined with capitalism, is that it builds this democratic system in a way that it relies on having external voices playing a particular given role, so that it can point to them and say things like, well, if you weren't in Australia, we'd be shooting rubber bullets at you, kind of thing. We need to think about the extent to which we are playing the role that has been given to us, and how we can play that role in a way that the system finds harder to co-opt and use for its own benefits. And that's really, really difficult to do. And yeah, I'm not pretending to have the answers.
It's fascinating, and I'm really looking forward to what you. I assume you'll go to a cave somewhere for about a couple of months and come back with a manifesto that we could all work out. But I mean, I've had this conversation again, particularly from people who are perhaps further to the left than me, or definitely subscribe more to a revolutionary socialist politics, and it's a critique of the state and all the harm that government can do. And you're a fool if you think that if you win political power or get into government, that you can seriously change people's lives. And I suppose I do struggle with that. If we acknowledge the fact that who in government, it matters who's in government, and that the government has the ability to make people's lives worse with their power and resources, doesn't it also stand to reason that that same power, that those resources can be used to improve people's lives? I mean, look at what the Labor government could be doing right now. The Labor government could legislate the right to strike. The Labor government could lift people out of poverty. The Labor government could set in motion a true transformation of our economy and energy system to seriously address the climate crisis. Those things are theoretically possible.
Theoretically, yes.
Man, even as I was saying that, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy talking about?
This is the thing. Like, I think I certainly used to absolutely subscribe to that view. Absolutely. And I've kind of, I've had somewhat anarchist tendencies throughout my life, and I've kind of been, in and out of spaces where I've had to sort of park those ideas for periods of time. But I certainly, we need to believe that government can improve people's lives, and it does. And this is the thing, it does to a given extent. And the extent to which it can and does do that is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And we're reaching this point of extraordinary crisis where it does not seem possible to do that. I would emphasize as well, I don't believe that revolution as such tends to solve the problems, because what we often see with revolution, and I'm hardly Robinson Crusoe saying this, what we often see with revolution is so much of a focus on destroying the old that you don't put enough effort into thinking about what the new world you want to build is, and it very easily gets co-opted by forces of violence that simply replicate these old models of hierarchy and domination and coercion. Time after time after time, we've seen that revolutionary change replaces one system of coercion and domination with another system of coercion and domination. So I think what we need to do, people often ask me, well, when you're saying this, do you mean we need to set the world on fire? Do you mean we need to burn the system down? It's like, excuse me, the world's on fucking fire. We don't need to light anything. It's on fire. Our task is to work out how we can grow our gardens in the ashes. Our task is to work out how we can start to cultivate the world that we need as this one crumbles. That's a much harder task than overthrowing a system that's already in crisis.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's an ongoing conversation, and actually, in recent conversations with Emerald, and I don't want to entirely speak for her, but she's been asking a lot of big questions about theory of change, more informed, I think, by the electoral failures or the lack of success electorally from the Greens in recent memories, particularly in the Queensland state election and then the federal losses, obviously. So perhaps a slightly different starting point there, but yes, certainly asking those bigger questions about what are we doing, and is our energy and time being put into securing serious change? But it's interesting that you cover it from the point of view. I was like, hey, even when we win, even when we are building and growing, there's still these massive limitations on how much we can change.
Right. Even when we win, we haven't yet won.
All right. Well, we're not finishing on that note. Okay. I'm going to finish on, I'd like to go out with a little video from Zach Palansky. Okay. So if people are following the Greens Party in the UK, they had this big, massive process where they elected their leader, if you can imagine such a thing, Tim. And I think Zack is pretty fucking awesome. I believe he is a gay, Jewish, socialist. He's done some wacky things in the past that he's apologized for. He's just very clear-eyed. He's fucking great in media interviews. And I think he is absolutely taking the mantle of the kind of left-wing populist vibe and trying to fill that gap with basically a right-wing Labor government and the defeat of the Corbyn movement. And so I don't know, maybe I'm naive, but seeing him sort of gives me a bit of hope. I don't know if you have strong thoughts about Palansky.
I think it's really, really important to have political leaders on the left who are willing to shine a really, really bright light on what's actually going on. And, and this is, again, I'm not saying we should stop seeking platforms through electoralism, because I think, many of our Greens MPs are just doing such extraordinary work shining lights on many of the awful things that are going on in our governments and in our parliaments. And we need to keep doing that. And whether Zach Palansky delivers 40 seats he's talking about delivering for the Greens at the next election, whenever, like it's years away in England anyway, it's years away, or not, getting up and having a political leader who's charismatic and articulate, talking about, shining a light on the misdirection that Nigel Farage and the Reform folk are doing.
Yes.
By distracting people from the role of the billionaires and blaming migrants, is really, really, really crucial. So I certainly wish him all the best, and I certainly wish that we Greens and others around the world don't invest too much of our trust in that kind of approach to politics, because it's still not enough.
Well, much to ponder there. Thank you very much, Tim Hollo, for all your support of this podcast, all your work at the Green Institute, and for joining me today. Are there any last plugs or things that you would suggest that people do check out if they're interested in finding out more about your thinking or the Green Institute's work?
I really encourage people to check out the Green Institute's website, greeninstitute.org.au, and what you'll find there, particularly if you go to greeninstitute.org.au/recordings, one of the things I'm most proud of is that we've hosted so many conversations with countless people. In my time as director, we've done 3 national conferences, gathering way over 100, academics and activists and advocates in all sorts of places to come and talk about big ideas. We've hosted dozens of webinars, and we've got recordings of all of that stuff on our website. We've got this amazing archive of fabulous conversations about really big, deep issues of Greens politics. And we've had decent audiences for them, but it's sitting there. All of this material is sitting there, and it's really difficult in this crazy, busy world to get people to find it. So I really want to encourage folk. The last big project that I did as director, as I mentioned, was running this series that I called The Missing Piece, talking about nonviolence. And I think it's really crucial that we talk as a movement about nonviolence. There's 6 webinars that you can watch with some amazing people talking about both the philosophy and the practice of nonviolence and how incredibly powerful it can be as a way to make change. So if there's one thing I'd ask you folk to do, it's, go and have a look at that. Have a listen, have a watch.
Thank you very much, Tim Hollo. Great to see you, man, and all the best for whatever's next.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Why is everything so shit? Our wages are shit.
500,000 workers protesting over pay, jobs and conditions.
Our rivers are swimming in shit.
Across England last year, raw sewage spilled down to England's rivers, lakes and coastal waters.
And most politicians, they're full of it too.
Order! Order!
And here's the truth. Those same politicians sold you out. The people you voted for, your supposed representatives, they stopped serving you a long time ago and now entirely serve big business. And once you see it, everything clicks. Follow the money and you will see both Starmer and Farage whining and dining hedge fund billionaires, oil and gas companies, arms traders, same dealers, same game. So what am I going to do that's different? I'm Zach Palansky, the new leader of the Green Party. And for starters, I'm saying this out loud. That's going to make me enemies fast. But I'm not here to make friends with the people wrecking this country. I'm here to take them on. And I know I'm not doing this alone. I know you're with me. We don't have to agree on everything. This is a democracy. We just have to have a common cause. So it's time to put money back where it belongs, into our communities, into the NHS, nationalise our water companies, stop selling arms to Israel, and of course, protect our natural world. The Green Party won't leave anyone behind. Let's turn our country around. Join us. Draw the line.
Serious danger to Australia.